Well, I think sexually transmitted infections generally are problems of large cities, particularly in deprived inner city areas in big cities. So obviously the problem's biggest in London, and Birmingham is a very large conurbation with areas of deprivation. So I think it's always been the case. There's a lot of STI in Birmingham.
And what patterns do you see in terms of age, gender and race?
So I think there are various trends. So generally speaking, sexually transmitted infections are a problem of young adults. So peak age really would be in the teens and then in the 20s. So it's generally young people who are most affected. Rates of some infections are higher in gay men, HIV for example. And then also some infections vary by ethnic groups. So for instance, we know that HIV is more common from people who have been born in African countries because HIV is very common over there. So it varies by infection really.
And what are the most common STI amongst particular groups, especially within Birmingham itself?
So for the whole population as a whole, the most common sexually transmitted infection is something called chlamydia, which affects all groups, but particularly young people. And there is a national chlamydia screening program which encourages sexually active people between the ages of 15 and 24 to come forward for a test. So that is probably the commonest important sexually transmitted infection.
And you mentioned the screening program. Just how do we tackle this issue moving forward?
Well, I think the methods are really the same as they always have been, and it's a case of redoubling our efforts. So it's partly about increasing education and awareness amongst everybody about sexually transmitted infections and how to protect themselves from them. They are by and large preventable if people avoid unprotected sex, for example. When people have been at risk or believe they've been at risk, then obviously the best thing to do is to come forward and get tested to make sure they're not infected as soon as possible.